Joining us now on the program for our weekly mental health discussion is Carrie Krawiec from the Birmingham Maple Clinic, where she is a therapist on their team. Carrie, thanks for being with us today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you on to talk this week, as we do each and every week, a variety of mental health topics. April is Stress Awareness Month, and we know that these days, with everything going on, whether it's our kids being in school, whether it's work, stresses, family life, certainly during a holiday season like we're in right now, stress can pile up and it can have quite a significant toll on people. So let's start with what we know about stress and just how much of our population really is affected by this at a significant rate.
Sure. So there are many different forms of stress, and stress can take both a physiological and mental toll on our body. It's something like the 15th leading cause of death. But what's so interesting about the research is that people's attitudes about stress are worse than actually stress itself. So having a positive attitude about stress and actually improves our ability to handle stress and actually survive it.
And so you mentioned some of those factors that can come from stress, some of those different responses, physiological, psychological, and so on. What are some of those effects that stress can have on those areas of our life and ultimately affect us down the road?
Stress can actually impact our immune system. We're more likely to get a cold if you're under stress or experiencing significant stressful events. It has cardiovascular effects on the body, meaning that it can cause our heart to tighten, make it more likely of a cardiac related death. And certainly it can cause depression, relationship issues, and anxiety.
We're joined by Carrie Krawiec on today's edition of the Megacast, a therapist at the Birmingham Maple Clinic. You can join us every Thursday for our weekly mental health segment on the Megacast and catch them all on demand on civiccentertv.com/Megacast. Carrie, continuing on, as we talk about that connection between stress and other areas of our body, whether it's physiological or mental, how do we curb stress? Because there's so many different kinds of it. There's so many different factors that contribute to it. But what are some ways that we can maybe begin to cope with some of that stress that could turn it into something more productive?
Sure. I love this question. So like I said, part of it is shifting your attitude about stress. Instead of thinking of, oh my gosh, this is so stressful, or this is going to be so hard, or I can't do this, these like negative thoughts, or that thinking, right, like stress itself is bad, changing your attitude, recognizing that stress is your body gearing up for something hard, a challenge, feeling like instead of calling it stress, calling it courage or bravery, that even just shifting the language we use about stress will help our body do stress better oxygen flow, better hormone release. A second thing that's really interesting about stress is that people who experience stressful life events are 30% more likely to die in the year following that event, but not if they're helping other people. So people who take care of other people and allow themselves to be taken care of actually completely reduce their risk. So turning to other people is something we don't do usually when we're stressed. We might bottle it up. We don't want to burden other people with our problems. Or if we know someone else is stressed, we may also not want it like as some kind of contagion. The reality is that both the giver and the receiver of care manage stress better when they're turning towards each other.
That's a really interesting point too, Carrie, because so often when people are feeling stressed, they want to just kind of clear their minds and get away from all that stimuli, because their first thought is there's just too much going on right now. There's too much piling up on me. I need to get away for a few moments, and that can be helpful. But that interaction with other people that you mentioned, what about that makes stress maybe a little bit less powerful or helps you cope with it better in these situations?
It's actually, we've talked before about oxytocin is a hormone that's released in our body. It's famous for being called the cuddle hormone. It goes between mothers and children in our relationships. But the reality is it's a stress hormone. And so it's actually released during stress to nudge us towards other people. So that's one like little known fact about it is that it's actually helpful during stress. It's actually, our body's actually telling us find people during stress, which we don't always do. And we don't always do the best of being towards people. We might be a little edgy and irritable and irritated when we're stressed. But all of this is actually a sign to seek comfort and seek help.
And so what are the most productive ways to do that too? Because for some people, reaching out and talking to someone else and saying, hey, I'm stressed, I'm feeling A, B, and C. This is the kind of toll that it's taking on me. That can be really helpful for you, but also, for other people, they got to be ready to shoulder some of the burden of that conversation that's coming their way, and if they're empathetic enough, that could make them feel really bad or make them feel stressed and worried about these other people. So how do you approach that in a way that's not going to ultimately end up bringing stress onto another person too?
Again, I think this conversation that you and I are having, really just people educating and being informed, right? That this is actually a good thing, not a bad thing. That being there for someone during stress actually does have physical and mental benefits for both parties. And bringing that positive attitude into the interaction will help neutralize some of that, like you said, some of that other anxiety. It's the bad attitudes about stress that really are more problematic than the stress itself. So bringing a sort of joyful, positive attitude. I'm so glad to be there for this person. I'm glad they selected me to be their trusted person, because we also get a benefit from it.
We're joined by Carrie Krawiec on today's edition of the Megacast. For our weekly mental health segment, we're talking about stress. As April is Stress Awareness Month. If you are looking to consult with a mental health professional, if you're feeling stressed or for other ailments, you can always call the Birmingham Maple Clinic at 248-646-6659 or visit them at birminghammaple.com. And Carrie, as we continue, stress, of course, is something that naturally occurs throughout our life, but as we get older, that toll that it can take, especially if it's severe cases of stress or continuous cases of stress, it can have serious effects, especially as we're getting into our mid to late 40s and beyond. Just how much of a toll does it take greater as you get older?
Gosh, I think like we said before, of course, all the functions of the body change. So, right, like if you're already at risk for a cardiac event and as you're aging, the risk increases, stress is also going to play a role. Certainly, too, people as they age may be more isolated at different points of their age, so maybe don't feel like they have those people to turn to and might have to go to some extra lengths to identify a person that could be their helpful, supportive person. But I do think that, again, too, it's the positive attitude about stress, shifting our attitude about stress. That the other thing is that it's important that we do experience things that cause us stress or challenge, but that we don't stay in stress, that we have also periods of relief or release and respite from that. We need rest. So we need to exercise, right? And exercise our minds and exercise our attitudes about stress, but also have periods of rest. So really mental and emotional fitness is not about not feeling any difficult emotions, but about having the experience of the emotions and then restoring some calm. So like you said, what are some other things we can do to do that? Certainly physical exercise, walk, time spent outdoors, time spent with people, time spent helping someone else. All of these things have stress relieving properties and calming properties that will help us long term.
And whether you're challenging your mind or you're challenging your body through exercise, mental exercises, or through physical exercise, that's another form of stress, but it's a good form of stress that helps your body also adjust to other forms of stress you may be feeling and ultimately have better responses to. In terms of talking through these issues, just to kind of go back to that, whether you're talking through it with a therapist or another mental health professional or someone in your family, a trusted confidant in your life, what's a good place to start for people that are feeling overwhelmed with stress and really just want to get that stuff off their chest?
I always think the best way to start, especially if you're trying to engage someone else, is start with an I statement. Often we start, especially when we're stressed, we might start pointing the finger. You're being too loud, or you're doing this that's bothering me, or whatever, to say, okay, wait, I'm, like you said, I'm feeling too much stimuli, or I'm feeling extra irritated about these things. If you start with an I statement, it's a little more inviting to get someone else to be helpful or want to listen. If you start with you, you're going to start repelling people away. They're going to become defensive and agitated as a result, which is not going to be the kind of relief that you need. So trying to put some I statements, how am I feeling, and find the feeling words that you, right. It might not, stress might not come to mind first, but frustration, annoyance, irritation might help lead down the direction of what is causing stress.
Beyond just having that interaction with another person about the stress that you're feeling and the benefits you've already discussed with us today about just doing that in terms of relieving stress, what other benefits can come from talking to a mental health professional? If you're feeling stress that's accumulating over a period of time, whether it's just moderate stress over a long period of time or severe stress over an acute period of time, how can that consultation with a mental health professional also benefit you in these cases?
Absolutely. Well, like you said, unlike a person that's perhaps close to you, they may not also offer a therapist is going to remain unbiased and neutral and also be able to cope and soothe themselves. That likely what you're saying is not going to feel as an attack on them. So they'll be able to be that open, supportive person, certainly being able to offer suggestions and skills. Are there boundaries with your time and location that need to be placed so that you can get the rest and respite you need? Is there therapy itself provides that space, right? 1 hour of time dedicated to yourself and your own mental well-being, which perhaps wouldn't necessarily happen in your home or something unless you dedicated it. And so therapy, not just the therapist person, but therapist, the environment helps to provide some space for calm in the midst of other stresses. Certainly, the act of talking about something, telling your story in itself is stress relieving, and also providing other skills, ways to look at things differently, perhaps to neutralize some of those negative thoughts. Offering things like breathing exercises. I think one thing, breath and breath work is so important for our body. Like we said, stress can impact the oxygen flow through our body, and breathing better can help to reduce stress. Often people breathe, pant, kind of hyperventilate when they're feeling panicked or stressed out. But if you do a lot of work to exercise breathing skills during periods of calm, then you're better able to access them during periods of stress, right? So if like exercise, if you don't regularly run and then you needed to run in an emergency, you may not be as strong at it. But if you practice over time, you can apply it when you really need to. The same goes with deep breathing and, exercising breath work, that when you apply it during periods of calm, you can really use it in an emergency when you're feeling very stressed or panicked to help yourself calm down.
And lastly, Carrie, this time of the year, it's time where many holidays are being celebrated by people across different faiths and ethnic backgrounds. And that can also be a natural stress point, getting back together with your family. We've talked about this in the past with the Christmas
Mhm.
holiday, winter holidays, and so
Mhm.
on. So, what are some steps that people should be taking if they're having those visits with their family or with friends or other people in their life? They're feeling that sort of stress in those situations to relieve some of that and not let that boil over.
So first and foremost, if you're the host or planning, is to acknowledge your stress as part of the excitement, and the stress is part of what's necessary to meet all of the expectations. If you're cooking or cleaning or hosting people, hosting guests, part of your stress is actually what's getting the job done. So to sort of welcome and applaud your stress, to say, look, it's giving me energy and enthusiasm and focus to do all these things, because that's what stress does. So a little bit of anxiety and stress is good because it helps us perform better. It's when it goes to too much stress or panic that it's not very helpful or useful. So trying to keep it in a good range, and again, appreciate it. Like, yeah, this stress is helping me get this all done, and it's going to be great when it's over. Certainly booking in time for yourself. Like I said, if you need time or space for exercise, for talking to someone, for just quiet and meditative time by yourself. If you're inundated with, some of these holidays are actually multiple days long, to be sure that you sort of book in some quiet time, some reflective time, some time outdoors. It's starting to be more like spring, so getting some sunshine, all of those things would be helpful.
Carrie, before we let you go, anything else that we haven't discussed about stress or about stress relief that would be important for our audience to keep in consideration at this time?
Yeah, I think just to circle back, right? Our bodies are made to endure stress. So stress is not the bad guy here. The worst thing about it is just chronic stress and a bad attitude about stress. So welcoming stress, like again, is something exciting, brave, courageous. All of those things are better than kind of bearing down and treating stress like it's bad. Just welcome it. It's brief and it'll be over, just like the storms yesterday. You can handle it in spurts. You can handle anything.
Well, Carrie, we appreciate you joining us as you do each and every week for a mental health segment, especially to talk about a topic like this that affects everybody here in our communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.